3, 2, 1.
Gotta blast!
Hello everyone, we are from Group 5. We'll present about today's topic, which is teaching science using experiment and laboratory skills. I hope all of you are in pink and enjoy the video.
Hi, my name is Amiruddin Haziq bin Razali and you can call me Ame.
Hello, hi. My name is Muhammad Syafiq bin Ahmad Nur Salim, but you can call me Syafiq.
Hello, my name is Wan Anis Nabila binti Wan Abdullah Zawawi. You can call me Anis.
Hi, my name is Nawatika Hani binti Abdul Razak and you can call me Watika.
Before we start, don't forget to hit the like button below. Without further ado, let's start our lesson today. We will begin our lesson today with experiment skills. What is experiment skills? Experiment skills provide us with knowledge of the physical world, and it is the experiments that provide us with the evidence that ground this knowledge. One of the major roles of experiment skills is to test theories and also to provide the basis for scientific knowledge. Next, we will proceed to the examples of experiment skills. There are 5 examples of experiment skills, which are observe and ask questions, formulate a hypothesis, test hypothesis, analyze data from experiment and draw a conclusion, and lastly is share the result. Now we will see the first example, which is observe and ask questions. Observation helps us formulate a challenging question that you will be able to test. A good question converts the natural sense of wonder into a focused line of investigation. For instance, when is the best time to drive to school? Which food is my cat's favorite? Which color suits me the best? Next is formulate a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a theory that you can test to see if your prediction is right or wrong. It is an attempt to answer your question with an explanation that can be tested. A good hypothesis allows you to make a prediction such as, if I do not eat any food for one whole day, then I will become hungry. The third is test the hypothesis. Your experiment tests whether your prediction is accurate and thus your hypothesis is supported or not. It is important for your experiment to be a fair test. You conduct a fair test by making sure that you change only one factor at a time while keeping all other conditions the same. Fourth is analyze data from experiment and draw a conclusion. Let's assume that you design a very careful experiment that controls as many variables as possible. Now, you can analyze the data to see whether your hypothesis is correct or incorrect. Depending on your findings, you may want to change your hypothesis or change the design of your testing. Perhaps you have discovered even more interesting questions. You can repeat as many times as necessary at this stage until you find the right hypothesis and test method to find accurate results. And lastly, share the result. When you are satisfied with what you have proven or disproven something important, report your results. In science, it is important to detail your methods so that your peers can review your work, which is a critical step to getting published. if your results are solid, your experiment can be repeated by other scientists. Such reproducibility is a sign of a good scientific work, but failed results can also be interesting. An incorrect prediction could prove to be important and should always be reported. Now, let us proceed to the laboratory skills, shall we? To find success in the professional world of science, you will need to have a wide variety of laboratory or lab skills. The better you understand the skills to excel in a particular scientific field, the better you will perform as a biologist, chemist, or another related profession. In this part, I will explain the definition basic science lab skills and provide you with examples of lab skills. Laboratory skills refer to the capability of carrying out certain tasks in a lab setting. It also refers to the skills that you use in a laboratory either as a research student or a professional researcher. Some examples include performing standard lab procedures or analyzing samples. Now let's proceed to the examples of laboratory skills. Though there are several types of lab skills, we will focus on the most basic that can be applied to several different fields. Here are some examples of lab skills. First is attention to detail. It is always important for a scientist to display excellent attention to detail. When working in a lab, you must be extremely accurate and diligent in your measurements and calculations. If not, the result could end up being false or misleading. Second is measuring pH. When you work in a lab setting, it is important that you have the skills needed to properly measuring pH. This involves testing the acidity of a solution. You should be able to know where a solution falls on the pH scale. That is to say, you should know that a pH below 7 means the solution is acidic, a pH greater than 7 is considered basic, and a pH of 7 is neutral. Third is pipetting. One of the most common skills in a lab is how to properly use a pipette, which is the cylinder tube used to measure or transfer small amounts of a liquid. You will need to acquire proper technique, which are have a steady eye and remain focused on the task. Because this skill is so widely used in a lab, it is a requirement for this type of career. Next is weighing. Another common skill to have in the lab is knowing how to weigh, since you will likely to use this throughout your lab career. To properly weigh, you have to find the right balance on the weight itself. It is also important that you are precise with your weighing and also measurements. Apart from that is sterilization of lab equipment. Because you will likely to be working with various chemicals and materials, it is important to not contaminate any solutions. To work in a lab, you should know how to properly sterilize all of the equipment you work with. By doing so, it will ensure that your lab testing and results remain accurate. And lastly is lab safety. Being safe in the lab is extremely important. Depending on your field, you could be using chemicals, other hazardous material, or lab equipment. These could all be harmful not only to you, but also to your fellow lab workers. In your scientific role, it is important that you are trained in a lab safety and that you are taking the necessary precautions to remain safe in your workplace. Having proper safety skills is vital to your success in the scientific world. Now we will proceed to the techniques in teaching science using experiment and laboratory skills. First is hands-on activity. Do you guys have any idea about what is hands-on activity? No? Well, hands-on activity is defined as where instructors engage with students in direct experience and focused reflection in order to enhance students' knowledge, skill set, and values. Hands-on learning allows students to learn through experiencing something and can give them an opportunity to immerse themselves in a learning environment while putting their acquired skills to use and building new skills. By allowing students to really get into science, it will give them the chance to make discoveries on their own. They will be more likely to remember a learning experience if it's from real experience. The students will be divided into several groups and then will do the experiment together as the instructions given by their teacher. Second is online activity. During the COVID-19 pandemic outbreak and public lockout, all educators on all levels from all over the world were challenged to conduct classes online. Science school teachers were in a particularly tough situation because they had to organize teaching of not only theoretical knowledge but also practical aspects, and therefore they needed to transfer experiments and laboratory activities to an online environment. Technical progress and the development of modern information and communication technologies, ICTs, created a wealth of opportunities to introduce students to practical aspects of chemistry during distant learning lessons. Experiments can be introduced in the forms of written descriptions assisted with photos, video recorded demonstrations, and live interactive demonstrations. As an alternative, students can carry out experimental work at their homes by using household substances. According to the Journal of Chemical Education in 2020, there have been studies comparing students' performance in hands-on and virtual laboratory courses. Students' understanding was similar whether participation was in person or online, which implies that virtual laboratories are also beneficial for the students. They can save time, money, and reduce chemical waste by doing an online experiment.
Hi guys, my name is Amiruddin Haziq, and let's move on to the next part, which is the issues on teaching science using experiment and laboratory skills. Before that, I hope you are already clear about the definitions and examples of experiment and laboratory skills. Now, we will discuss more details about the issues that may arise from these teaching techniques. For today, I would like to highlight three main issues, which are the readiness of school, lack of laboratory skills among teachers, and students' motivation and understanding. As you can see, these issues are very related to each other and involve various parties at education level. First and foremost, let's talk about the readiness of school. But before that, I want to explain about the global issue, which is COVID-19. Since the incident of COVID-19, our education system has been changed and never be the same because we cannot have physical class. On March 19, 2020, our government authorities ordered every schools and education institution in Malaysia to close due to pandemic. Throughout since March 2020 until right now, our education institutions still cannot allow people to attend normally as it used to be. For example, there is a period of time where students can attend the school, but they have to take turns to do it by weeks. Moreover, let's say what if suddenly there is a positive case in the school. Of course, the school authorities have to order to close their institution for a while because safety and life of the students are more important, right? But this is still a very bad environment for students to cope with. Imagine going to learn on daily life with these new norms of student life. Now, let's go back to our main point. Readiness of school. Due to COVID-19, education has to be conducted online and courses. Teachers and students cannot attend school during the lockdown, as I've mentioned before. Even if they can attend the school, they have to take turns to come to the school by weeks because school doesn't allow people to come to school. Teachers cannot have the access to the laboratory. By the way, there is a lot of experiments that requires things that we regularly don't have at home or anywhere else besides laboratories such as conical flask, beaker, thermometer, test tube, syringe stand, and many other science apparatus that you can think that we cannot obtain in our daily life. I also want to add up that the schools don't allow teachers to attend the place without adjustment tests, even if it is for the purpose of teaching such as borrowing the science apparatus. This cause lesson-based experiment is hard to be conducted by the teachers during this pandemic. Moving on to the second issue, let's talk about the lack of laboratory skills among teachers. During lesson-based experiment, teachers might lack of laboratory skills due to: first is, pre-service teachers have difficulties in handling lesson-based experiment because of lacking experiences. Pre-service teachers are the candidates who train from higher educations to become professional teachers. Sometimes there are certain cases where pre-service teachers fail to apply what they learn in the course to prepare their lesson plans and do the actual teaching. Secondly, teachers have difficulties to conduct experiment because of what they study are not being practiced. For example, during this pandemic where education system has been changing, even the professional teachers with experiences are being clueless on how they will have to conduct laboratory experiment in online classroom without going to school. They have been conducting laboratory experiment with the help of school's equipment and physical classroom for years. And this is the first time in their teaching life where they have to conduct it through online classroom. As you can see from this article of newspaper, people are recommending that some subjects should be reduced during this PDPR to bring down the stress of both teachers and students. This article does show those proof that even professional teachers are having difficulty in adapting towards online distance learning right now. For the final issue, let's focus on our students' motivation and understanding during this pandemic. The level of motivation and understanding of students may be affected because, number one, students are not able to keep up with the sudden changing environment as schools keep closing for a long time. There is no physical contact among the students, and they are actually alone at home to face their online learning from school. Number two, laboratory experiments only happen when schools are reopening to teachers and students, which is very rare and difficult to be handled because they have to take turns by weeks to enter the school, and just in case if there is even one positive case, the school will have to close their building immediately for the safety of the public. Number 3, the systematic syllabus becomes complicated and the students only able to learn theoretically for a major lesson of the subject. As laboratory experiments are being missed for several times, there will be lack of practical learning and students will be only taught the theoretical knowledge of their subjects most of the time. And soon enough, there will be difficulties in updating what they are learning. By the way, let's not forget the stress condition that students are facing right now. I hope we as future educators are able to carry our responsibilities to guide our students in a right path.
Hello guys, now I will discuss on effects of teaching science using experiment and laboratory skills. In this part, we will try to answer this question. Does teaching science using experiment and laboratory skills have any positive effects on students' learning? Let's find out. The first effect of using experiment and laboratory skills is students will be able to enhance their mastery in a science subject. Secondly, students can develop a positive science attitude. Thirdly, promote cooperative learning among students. And lastly, cultivating interest in science. Let's dive deeper into these effects to get a better understanding. For the first point, enhancing mastery of science. By experimenting, students can improve their science process skills, which directly able to increase their achievement. But how do experiment and laboratory skills increase students' achievement? Before that, let's take a look at the crucial elements required in science process skills. It includes observing, measuring, classifying, inferring, predicting, and communicating. These skills were necessary to ensure one experiment is successful or not. Now, let's get back to our previous question. How do experiment and laboratory skills increase students' achievement? By experimenting, students can get a better understanding of phenomena around them, answer questions on mysteries of the universe, and lastly help students to discover authentic information from reliable, authorized sources. Then, students will be encouraged to ponder about everything that happens around them, like why does the leaf's color be green? Why is it easy to swim in the sea than in the river? And why is a flash of lightning seen before the thunder? These questions that build up inside them will increase their intrinsic motivation, meaning that the student will be moved to act for the fun or challenge entailed rather than because of external factor. Let's proceed on the second point of effects on teaching science using experiment and laboratory skills, which is developing a positive science attitude. There are 5 attitudes a good scientist must possess, which the first one is curiosity, which means a strong desire to know or learn something. This attitude will help students show interest and pay particular attention to objects or events. Secondly, honesty. A good scientist must give a truthful report of observations to avoid misinterpretation of research that will cause inconsistency among other research. Thirdly, open-mindedness. A good scientist will respect others' point of view and change his mind if reliable evidence contradicts his beliefs. For example, when a person believes that the earth is flat, but all evidence proves that the earth is ellipsoid-shaped, the person must be open-minded to the evidence shown and accept the fact that the earth is not flat. Fourthly, skepticism. Skepticism is the act of suspending judgment. It helps the scientist to assess information before accepting it directly. Lastly, creativity. Creativity is the highest level of attitude a scientist may possess. It helps scientists to generate new and original ideas. All these 5 attitudes were able to boost students' morale and motivation to gain knowledge, not only in the science field but also in other subjects. Next, let's move on the third effect of teaching science using experiment and laboratory skills, which is develop cooperative learning. Cooperative learning is an instructional method in which students work in small groups to accomplish a common learning goal under the guidance of the teacher. For example, usually when doing lab activities, the teacher will ask students to form a small group. Then, teachers will explain the procedure of the experiment. Teacher then will let students perform the lab activities in their group. By experimenting, students need to communicate and cooperate with their teammates to accomplish the task given by the teacher. Also, students learn to delegate tasks among them, and they need to brainstorm and share their thoughts on how to accomplish the task. All these elements will help students to train their communication and leadership skills. Okay, let's move to the last positive effect of teaching science using experiment and laboratory skills, which are cultivating interest in science. Experimenting can build interest in science among students because students can test theories and concepts to gain a better understanding of the subject matter. For example, the students can get a better understanding of the concept of density only by experimenting because they can see what happens to object or liquid with different density. Then, by experimenting, students can increase their understanding and confidence in the conclusion proven by the experiment. Lastly, students will become motivated to explore knowledge on their own.
Science is different from any other subject. In order to understand its concept, one has to look beyond the books and conventional classroom teaching. Effective teaching and learning of science involve seeing, handling, and manipulating real objects and materials. The knowledge that kids attain in classroom will be ineffectual unless they actually observe the process and understand the relationship between action and reaction. So here are the advantages of teaching science using experiment and laboratory skill. First and foremost, help encourage deep understanding in children. Effective teaching and learning of science involve a perpetual state of show and tell. Good school combine classroom teaching with laboratory experiment to ensure that their students grasp each and every concept truly. It is also believed that laboratory teaching and experiment that are being conducted help encourage deep understanding in children. Children are able to retain the knowledge for longer when they see the experiment being performed in front of their eyes. This is because science lab equipment allows students to interact directly with the data gathered. They get a first-hand learning experience by performing various experiments on their own. Students are made to use the model and understand the different scientific theory and concepts. There are several scientific theory and concepts that are difficult to explain directly from the books, right? Anatomy models, physics science kit, and chemistry science kit, for instance, made it easy to understand the otherwise complex theory of science. Next, developing practical skills. In laboratory experience, students may learn to use the tool and conventional of science. For example, they may develop skill in using scientific equipment correctly and safely, making observation, taking measurement, and carrying out well-defined scientific procedure. Each equipment has its own guideline on how to handle it correctly, right? When students do an experiment, they can know how to handle it correctly and what they need to do and avoid in laboratory. For instance, in science, we learn about microorganisms and our objective is to study about cells. So, we need to use microscope in order to see the cell, right? By doing this experiment, students can learn on how to use microscope correctly and taking the data from the experiment. Other than that, teaching science using experiment and laboratory skill also cultivating students' interest in science and interest in learning science. As a result of laboratory experiments that make science come alive, students may become interested in learning more about science and see it as relevant to everyday life. Last but not least, developing teamwork abilities. Laboratory experience may also promote a student's ability to collaborate effectively with others in carrying out complex tasks, to share the work of the task, to assume different roles at different times, and to contribute and respond to ideas. In school, students are divided into groups when doing an experiment in lab, right? Students need to discuss with their friends on how to solve the problem related to the experiment given together. There are 3 disadvantages of teaching science using experiment and laboratory skill. It is seen that the teacher faces problems mostly caused by context, such as class, school, and laboratory, followed by teacher-related and student-related problems. Inadequate material and the laboratories being useless are the major problem faced by the student and the teacher. The problem caused by context are followed by one caused by teacher. The major problem caused by the teacher are teacher failing to manage time and not preparing the laboratory before the class is held. Third, the problem caused by the student are students not taking the laboratory work seriously and considering it as a place for entertainment that can lead to the accident. Now, let's move on to the guideline for teacher and student. We have learned about safety rules and measurement in the laboratory in school, right? In order to keep us safe in the lab, there are a variety of protective equipment that we and our students need to know and use correctly. Personal protective equipment or PPE can be divided into two, which are for students and PPE in lab. For students, we have goggles, face mask, gloves, lab coat, and closed shoes or safety shoes. Personal protective equipment is needed to protect the student and teacher from danger. Personal protective equipment that is available in the laboratory include the safety shower, ice wash station, phone chamber, and laminar flow cabinet. Even though there is personal protective equipment in the laboratory, every accident in the laboratory must be reported immediately to the teacher to avoid unwanted things to happen in the laboratory. Next, science education emphasizes on obtaining knowledge, right? In which include hands-on knowledge involving experiments that conducted in laboratories. However, since experiments require interaction between students, substance, and laboratory equipment that can pose great risk to users, especially students. Therefore, the Ministry of Education Malaysia has taken proactive approach to enhance laboratory safety via school science laboratory management and safety guidebook, textbooks, and science-based practical workbooks that are used throughout secondary school in Malaysia. For your information, accidents are commonly reported in science laboratory around the world, in which underline the need for awareness on the importance of prioritizing safety in science laboratories. The accident rate in academic chemical laboratory is about 10 to 50 times higher than in industry laboratories. So, here is the step to handle if accident happen in the lab. First, inform to the teacher or the laboratory assistant immediately. Second, make the spillage area as a restricted zone. Third, stop the spillage from spreading by using sand to form a boundary. Next, scope the chemical spillage. Last but not least, dispose of it safely.
That's all from us. Thank you for listening.